Something has gone terribly wrong with our kids. Sometime around the year 2012, the lines on the graphs all started to move, and they all moved in the wrong direction. Rates of anxiety, of depression, of loneliness, of self-harm, and of suicide among adolescents and young adults all began to skyrocket, especially for girls. After decades of relative stability, the mental health of an entire generation seemed to fall off a cliff. What happened? Was it a new virus? Was it something in the water? Was it economic anxiety or political polarization? According to the social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, the answer is simpler, and much more fundamental than that. In his urgent, essential, and deeply researched book, The Anxious Generation, he argues that we are in the middle of a massive, uncontrolled, and ongoing experiment on our children. An experiment that involves what he calls the Great Rewiring of Childhood. This is the story of how, in the space of just a few short years, we systematically took away the traditional play-based childhood that human beings have had for millennia, and we replaced it with a new, disembodied, and anxiety-provoking phone-based childhood. This is not a book that blames parents or shames kids. It is a clear-eyed, compassionate, and powerful diagnosis of a collective crisis, and a hopeful, philosophical, and practical guide for how we can, and must, find our way back. To understand the core of Haidt's argument, you have to understand the two massive simultaneous changes that he says rewired childhood between 2010 and 2015. The first change was the near-total collapse of the play-based childhood. Think about what childhood was like for most of human history, and certainly for most of us. It was a world of unsupervised, unstructured, and often risky play. We climbed trees, we built forts in the woods, we rode our bikes for miles without our parents knowing exactly where we were. We played pickup games of baseball in the park, where we had to negotiate the rules and solve our own disputes. We got into scrapes, we got lost, we got bored, and we figured things out. This kind of free, independent play, Haidt argues, is not just a fun diversion. It is the essential work of childhood. It is the primary way that young mammals are programmed to develop into resilient, confident, and socially competent adults. It's how we learn to take sensible risks, how we learn to cooperate, and how we learn to overcome fear. But starting in the 1980s and accelerating dramatically in the 90s and 2000s, a culture of fear began to take hold. Driven by a media that sensationalized rare cases of child abduction and a new, intensive style of parenting, we began to systematically remove risk and independence from our children's lives. We stopped letting them walk to school alone. We replaced free play with structured, adult-supervised activities. We, with the best of intentions, bubble-wrapped our kids, trying to protect them from every possible danger. We were trying to keep them safe, but we were unintentionally making them fragile. We had taken away the real world. And then, just as the real world was disappearing, a new, much more compelling world arrived. This was the second great change, the rise of the phone-based childhood. Between 2010 and 2015, smartphones went from a niche product for adults to being universally in the hands of children. And on those smartphones came the new, algorithmically driven social media platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. So, in the span of just a few years, we performed a radical experiment on an entire generation. We took away their shared, physical, and synchronous world of play, and we replaced it with a solitary, virtual, and asynchronous world of screens. This, Haidt argues, is the Great Rewiring, and it has been a developmental disaster. Why was this trade so catastrophic? Haidt identifies 4 foundational harms that the phone-based childhood inflicts upon the developing brains of children and adolescents. The first is social deprivation. For millions of years, human beings have evolved to be in rich, synchronous, face-to-face social interaction. We are masters of reading nonverbal cues, the tone of voice, the facial expression, the body language. This is how we learn to empathize, to cooperate, and to resolve conflicts. The phone-based world replaces this rich, embodied interaction with a thin, disembodied, and performative one. Online, you are not a person. You are a profile. You are not having a conversation, you are posting content. The constant pressure to perform, to curate a perfect image of yourself, and the fear of being publicly shamed or excluded creates a constant state of social anxiety. We have deprived our kids of the very thing they need most for healthy social development, genuine, real-world human connection. The second harm is sleep deprivation. The evidence for this is overwhelming and undeniable. The arrival of smartphones in the bedroom has had a devastating effect on the quantity and quality of sleep that teenagers are getting. They are staying up late, scrolling through their feeds, bathed in the blue light that disrupts their natural sleep cycles. And a lack of sleep, as any scientist will tell you, is a direct cause of depression, of anxiety, and of an inability to regulate one's emotions. The third harm is attention fragmentation. The human brain is designed for monotasking, for deep, sustained focus on a single object. This state of flow is where we do our best work, and it is deeply satisfying. The phone-based world is the exact opposite of this. It is a world of constant interruption, of endless notifications, of context switching every few seconds from a text message to a video to a news alert. This constant fragmentation of attention makes it nearly impossible for a young person to get lost in a book, to focus on their homework, or to simply be present with their own thoughts. It trains the brain to be in a constant state of distraction, which is a state of chronic, low-grade anxiety. And the fourth and final harm is addiction. These social media platforms are not neutral tools. They are some of the most sophisticated persuasion and addiction machines ever created. They are designed by armies of brilliant engineers to use the principles of behavioral psychology, like intermittent variable rewards, to hook you, to keep you scrolling, and to maximize the amount of your time and attention they can sell to advertisers. We have, in effect, allowed our children to be plugged into a machine that is designed to addict them. While this new, phone-based world has been harmful to all young people, Haidt shows that it has affected girls and boys in different and equally devastating ways. The mental health crisis has been significantly worse for girls. The reason, he argues, is that the most popular social media platforms, particularly Instagram, are perfectly designed to prey on the specific vulnerabilities of adolescent girls. The girls' social world has traditionally been based on smaller, more intimate friendships, and it is also more prone to relational aggression, like gossip and social exclusion. Social media takes these dynamics and puts them on steroids. It creates a massive, performative, and brutally judgmental social arena. It is a world of constant social comparison. A girl is no longer just comparing herself to the other girls in her high school. She is comparing herself to millions of other girls, and to professional influencers who present a digitally altered, impossibly perfect version of their lives. This leads to a crushing sense of inadequacy, of not enoughness. The visual, public, and permanent nature of social media, where a single awkward photo or a cruel comment can be seen by everyone and can live forever, has created an environment of unprecedented social anxiety for girls. The data is clear. The more time a teenage girl spends on social media, the more likely she is to be depressed, anxious, and to engage in self-harm. For boys, the story is a little different. While they are also affected by the harms of social media, the primary effect of the phone-based childhood for boys has been a retreat from the real world into the virtual one. The allure of ever more realistic and immersive video games, and the easy availability of online pornography has pulled millions of boys out of the messy, difficult, and demanding real world of school, of work, of relationships. Haidt argues that this retreat is leading to a failure to launch. Boys are spending less time with their real-world friends. They are less likely to get a driver's license, less likely to have a part-time job, and less likely to go on dates. They are becoming more risk-averse in the real world, while becoming masters of a virtual one that offers a constant stream of easy, unearned dopamine hits. The result is a generation of young men who are often disconnected, unmotivated, and adrift, lacking a sense of purpose and a clear path to a meaningful adult life. The way back 4 foundational reforms. After laying out this devastating diagnosis, the final part of The Anxious Generation is a powerful and hopeful call to action. Haidt argues that this is not an impossible problem to solve. We created this crisis by making a series of collective choices, and we can unmake it by making a new, wiser set of choices. He proposes 4 simple, foundational reforms that he believes would, in a few short years, reverse the epidemic of mental illness. The first is, no smartphones before high school. We would not give a child a shot of whiskey or a pack of cigarettes, but we have, without thinking, given them a device that is, for a developing brain, just as addictive and harmful. He argues that children should be given simple flip phones for communication, but that the powerful, distracting, and all-consuming world of the smartphone should be delayed until they are at least 14. The second reform is, no social media before 16. He argues that the years between 10 and 16 are a period of intense and vulnerable neurological and social development, particularly for girls. We should treat social media like we treat getting a driver's license or being able to vote. It is an adult activity that requires a level of emotional maturity that young adolescents simply do not have. He calls for a clear legal age verification system for these platforms. The third reform is phone-free schools. Schools should be places of learning, of focus, and of real face-to-face social interaction. The constant presence of smartphones in classrooms and hallways is a catastrophic distraction that harms both learning and social development. He argues that schools should require students to put their phones in a locked pouch or a locker for the entire school day, from the first bell to the last. And the fourth and final reform, and perhaps the most important, is a call for far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. This is the antidote to the virtual childhood. We need to consciously and collectively push back against the culture of fear and overprotection. We need to let our kids walk to school alone. We need to give them more unstructured, unsupervised time to play and explore. We need to let them get bored, and to get into scrapes, and to figure things out for themselves. We need to give them back a real, tangible, and challenging childhood. Haidt is clear that these reforms cannot be achieved by parents acting alone. It is a collective action problem. If you are the only parent who doesn't give their 10-year-old a smartphone, your child will be socially excluded. That is why we need to act together, as schools, as communities, and as a society, to change the norms and create a healthier environment for all of our kids. The ultimate message of the anxious generation is one of urgent hope. The problem is immense and the stakes could not be higher. But the solution is not a mystery. It is not about some new technology or some complex educational theory. It is about returning to a deep, ancient, and philosophical understanding of what children need to thrive. They need a stable and loving family, they need a supportive community, and they need a childhood of unsupervised play and meaningful responsibility in the real world. The book is a powerful and courageous call to give them back that world. It is an inquiry into the very nature of a healthy childhood. If you believe that our children's future is worth fighting for, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore the ideas that can help us build a better world.